going to throw. One-on-one. Davis has it. Touchdown. Carolina wins. Carolina is the Coastal Division champion. Javonte Williams to the left of Howe. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howe looking, standing tall, lets it go. Man there. Touchdown. Touchdown, Carolina. The pistol. Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson. He tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted. Surratt intercepts it. Holy cow, Carolina's going to win. And off to Javonte Williams again. Pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back. Pressure coming. Aguilar floats it up. Incomplete. No flags. Head on back up the mountain. Carolina wins it in double overtime. Loftus out of the shotgun. Throws to the end zone. Incomplete. Incomplete. The bell belongs to us. Carolina wins it. 47-45 in double overtime.
Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Vlog podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, with you guys as always. And it's been a little bit of time since we talked to you guys. There's been a lot going on, especially on my side of things in terms of some mental health stuff. And so took a little bit of time off, but we are here. We are ready to go. That's the reason that we have been off for so long. So just wanted to make sure that you guys, I didn't think we were gone, that you guys, don't have to be worried about what I'm going through right now. I've, starting to make it out to the other side. And so, hopefully, we can get this thing back on track here, continue what we've been doing here throughout most of the last few months, which is covering Carolina football. And again, we are in one of the most interesting times in the history of Tar Heel football. And it's why, an episode like tonight has to happen, because Carolina, they have a coach that's extremely polarizing, a guy that many NFL teams probably think about whenever there is a head coaching vacancy. Well, Bill Belichick has been linked to 2 jobs already. So we'll talk a little bit about that. What do we think that ultimately means? How concerned are we that he is going to potentially up and leave Carolina before he even actually coaches a game on the field for the Tar Heels? We also have some portal hauls that we have to talk about here. 6 commitments since we were last on here. So we'll talk about those. We'll tell you, maybe, the guys that we like out of that group, that we think could be impact players. But there are also some concerns from the fan base that Carolina is missing on too many guys. Now, again, it's a small fraction of the fan base, but do they maybe have a point? We'll talk a little bit about that, and then a couple of other things on the way out for you guys that we'll hit on just very shortly at the end of the show, a couple other headlines as well. So let's get right into the Bill Belichick, and we'll be linked to NFL jobs, because I think that's the most interesting part of this. This is a weird spot that Carolina is in right now, because I don't remember the last time that Carolina was in a spot like this. Maybe there were teams that were looking possibly at Butch Davis when he was here, during the late 2000s. Not really sure. There wasn't social media. As a young kid at that time, really was just focused on what was going on the field. Didn't focus a lot on the offseason storyline, stuff like that. I don't remember a time where you have had a coach in Chapel Hill that NFL teams have been seriously considering as a possible head coaching candidate. But that's where we're at with Bill Belichick. And so anytime a job comes open, there are going to be sites that are going to link him to that job. Now, the thing is it depends on how much credence you actually put on it. The one that he was originally linked to that got everyone fired up early last week was when he was linked to the Las Vegas Raiders job. I believe that was on Tuesday or Wednesday, one of those 2 days. And it was a very well-sourced report from Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network, said that Tom Brady spoke with Belichick and he wanted to gauge what he would want in order to take the job. Since that point, Diana Rossini has come out and said that Belichick has no interest at this time in going back to the NFL. There have been a couple other reports as well, kind of dispelling that. Michael Lombardi goes on the Pat McAfee show and says, look, there's not really much truth to that. We're good where we're at right now. And currently he's not looking at NFL jobs. So when it comes to that one, I guess we can kind of put that in the rear view, although I think the longer that coaching search goes on, it could get a little bit more interesting the more desperate they get. Now, and this is the reason why it's perfect that we have Josh with us tonight, he is being linked to the Dallas Cowboys job. Now, this is not official. There's not anybody that has come out and said that he has been talked to by the Cowboys. There's not anybody that's come out and said that he is interested in taking the Cowboys job. But that job officially became open earlier today. The team ends up moving on from Mike McCarthy officially. And so now that's one of the best jobs really in all of sports. The head coach of the Dallas Cowboys is up there as one of the best jobs in all of sports in terms of recognition, the history. And so now that people are wondering, is there enough intrigue there where Dallas could possibly steal Bill Belichick away from Carolina? You being the resident Cowboy fan here on the show, what do you think about the possibility of your NFL team potentially stealing your college head coach?
I think it's slim and none. Mike McCarthy's no longer in Dallas because Jerry Jones didn't want to give him a long-term contract, because up until today, the belief was that he was going to be back in Dallas, but on a short-term deal. Mike McCarthy, rightfully so, wanted a long-term contract. Jerry Jones failed to commit to that. They ultimately go their separate ways. There's going to be a lot of smoke here because Dallas is the best opening right now in the NFL. It's the one opening that he could quickly get the 15 wins he needs to get to become the all-time wins leader in the National Football League, because it would take him about a year and a half or so to get that done. But I don't see it happening. I know that he thinks very fondly of Jerry Jones as an owner. I know Jerry Jones thinks very fondly of him as a football coach. Their two egos I don't think could coexist, and I think they probably both know that. So this is the one that if you're a Tar Heel fan that got up in arms over the Raider report last week, then this one should strike legitimate fear in you, because this is probably the one job that's open that he would leave Carolina for. None of these other jobs I think he would leave Carolina for. They're not in they're not good situation jobs unless a Pittsburgh came open in the next couple of days or so. So I don't see it happening. But of all the jobs that are open right now, this is the most legitimate one that if you're freaking out and fretting that he might leave, this would be the one that he would turn his back on Carolina, because Jerry Jones has the money to pay the buyout. He's not paying like four other head coaches like Mark Davis is for the Raiders. He's not strapped for cash like that organization is. But ultimately, I think when it's all said and done, when this team takes the field in August, Bill Belichick will be on his sideline.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that ends up actually being the case. I will say that I do think that this is this. I'm with you. I think this is the biggest threat. Now, I'm not the guy that thinks that if the Raiders eventually are desperate enough that they can't get him. I definitely think that is possible. Just because, I mean, you look at the connection with Tom Brady. I think that is still a franchise that makes a ton of money. The fact that they're in Vegas is not by any means a coincidence. They make plenty of money being there. So I think that there is, if Vegas gets desperate enough, I do think that there's a legitimate chance that he can end up there as well. I'm not going to say that I'm terrified. I'm not going to say that I'm basically, assuming that he is going to take one of the jobs. I am cautiously optimistic that he's actually going to be Carolina's head coach, because I do think that with the money that the NFL has, that $10 million buyout means nothing. Like, especially, if Jerry Jones wants it. And I think that the thing that you have to wonder about with Jerry Jones is, has he gotten to the point now where he is desperate enough to win another title before he ends up passing away at some point in his, in what we would see as probably the next, 10, 15, 20 years, somewhere in that window? Is he desperate enough with the lack of success that they've had and, him getting older to say, you know what? We're going to go out and get Bill Belichick. I will pay whatever it costs. I will step aside and allow him to do whatever he wants to do if it means that we can get a title. So I think the next few weeks are going to be really interesting for Carolina. Now, I will say, and I don't know if you've seen this as well, the guy that's most linked to that job as of right now is Kellen Moore. That seems to be the guy that a lot of Dallas beat reporters think is going to end up getting the job. What do you think about that? Is that the guy that you're hearing as well, or are there other names that could maybe take, some of the concerns away from Carolina fans that Bill Belichick may not be at the top?
Yeah, no, that name definitely makes the most sense. Former quarterback for the team, former offensive coordinator that, when they went in a different direction a few years ago, this was a guy that went to LA, is now at Philadelphia. And he's gotten a little bit more wiser. He's been a little bit more around the league. So Kellen Moore is going to be the front runner, and probably rightfully so when you look at this isn't the best coaching cycle in terms of hotshot coordinators outside of the guys in Detroit that are very much in demand, and Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. There's so much in command that they've turned down interviews so far in this interview or in this NFL head coaching cycle as well. So it's early, though. I mean, the job's been open officially for about 8 hours or so. Jerry Jones is going to be aggressive, and if he finds someone that he wants, he'll stop at no wins to get him. But there's going to be a lot of smoke around the Belichick thing. This is the one that you probably need to be the most fearful of, but I still think at the end of the day, he'll be in Chapel Hill as opposed to Dallas, Texas come next fall.
All right, so let's move on to what's currently going on with the Tar Heels in the meantime. Look, he's out recruiting. He's on the recruiting trail. They're still bringing in transfers. They're putting together this staff. So Carolina's doing a lot of stuff that would still point to the fact that he is bought in on this. He is making sure that even if he is potentially going to take one of those jobs at some point, he's making sure that this is ready to go just in case that doesn't end up actually happening. Carolina, they've landed 6 commits since the last time that we were on here. I'll run through these guys really quickly. Just give you just a little bit of background on them. William Boone, the offensive tackle transfer from Prairie View A&M. He is a guy that was spent 1 year at Prairie View A&M, did not allow a sack this past year. Prior to that, a junior college guy. That's the reason why he has the extra year of eligibility. Probably a guy that I guess you would imagine comes in and maybe competes for one of the starting jobs. More than likely probably fills the shoes of a guy like Ja'Kiah Leftwich, who was a versatile piece that Carolina had on the roster if they needed him, but ultimately probably not a guy that's going to end up starting. Then you get to nickelback Gavin Gibson. This is a guy that's going to play in the slot at the corner spot, was pretty productive there. The thing that you have to remember is you might look at the yards that he gave up this year and you might say, well, that's kind of concerning because he did allow, a decent amount of yards in coverage. Slot corners are always going to allow the most yards on your team. You at least hope they do. If it's your outside corners, then those guys are really just getting lit up. But your slot corners, because of how much quick stuff there is in a lot of these offenses, they're guys that are going to allow a lot of catches and a lot of yards. The big thing is that they limit the yards after catch, which he did a pretty decent job of, and he's a pretty good tackler. I think this is a really nice pickup for Carolina and one that people should probably be excited about. You get to edge rusher Price Yates out of Connecticut, name you should be very familiar with. Guy that dominated the game against Carolina in the Fenway Bowl, was named defensive MVP when he had 6 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and a sack in that game. He has been incredibly productive in his career so far, 3 years with Connecticut. He started his career on the interior of the defensive line in his first season and then kicked out to edge rusher the last 2 years. He was limited this season, but in those 3 years, he has 29 tackles for loss and 12 sacks. He is a productive guy that comes in here, gives Carolina some edge rushing presence after they lose a guy like Kamen Rucker to graduation. Then you move on to safety Coleman Bryson, the transfer out of Minnesota. This is a guy that's kind of been on and off the field as a starter. He's had moments where he has started for him, other times where he's been more of a rotational guy. Still solidly productive, played really well this past year in the game against Carolina earlier this season. And so I think he's a guy that can come in a room that's being completely overhauled and at least compete for one of the starting jobs. Wide receiver Jason Robinson, the transfer from Washington. Carolina wanted to be aggressive. They wanted to go out, get a veteran in that slot corner spot or slot receiver spot, Unfortunately, that did not happen. And so they go with another guy. This a guy that's 5'10", 151 pounds. You'll see a lot of these guys. There'll be a guy we'll talk about that Carolina offered in the 2025 class that has similar build coming up here a little bit later, but is a guy that was pretty well regarded coming out of high school, top 500 player, was voted this year as the scout team MVP at the awards given out by Jed Fish and Washington just a couple of weeks ago at their official award ceremony. So a guy that was a bright spot, but just didn't play this past year. Then you get to Peyton Waters. That's the guy that ended up signing with Carolina earlier today. Another Washington transfer, a guy that played a little bit for Stephen Belichick this past season. Only 10 snaps on the defensive side, played on special teams. But the thing to know about him is coming out of high school, a guy that was ranked number 231 overall last season. So again, as a true freshman, didn't see a lot of snaps, but was very valuable on special teams and is a really highly thought of prospect coming out of the high school ranks. So I think this is, it's a solid group for Carolina. Are they guys that are going to blow you away with some of what they did? I think outside of Price Yates, probably not. But I do think that this is a group that can help Carolina out. You see a lot of guys on the defensive side of the ball where Carolina is doing a lot of overhauling. And I think, it's not one of the top classes in the entire country, but it's a very solid one that Belichick and his group are piecing together while still not having most of the position coaches.
And I think what you got to look at with what they're doing is I think they're trying to fill some holes quickly, add some depth, and then doing what Belichick has done the majority of his coaching career, which is getting more out of underdeveloped talent, out of talent that maybe no one else sees something in, but his eye leads him to go get an offensive lineman from Prairie View, or a defensive back from the Group of 5 ranks like East Carolina. Although we see East Carolina enough, we know that he's a good football player, and that you think in Belichick's scheme and the coaching could even become a really good football player. So, no, have they had the home run transfer portal commit this transfer portal class? That answer is no. I don't know how much of in a position they've really been to land a home run guy, but I think you got to like what they're doing in terms of adding depth, adding talent, and then adding upside to the roster. Because I think that's something that under Mac Brown, and of course they didn't have the resources that Belichick's been given, but that was the problem that Carolina had in the past couple of years, was that they couldn't fill depth, or they couldn't even really add guys that you were confident in that if they were taking a risk on him, that staff was going to get the most out of them. I think there's a reason to believe that these guys that might not jump out to us as casual football fans or even dire football fans will know what with Belichick and his coaching pedigree that he and his staff will get the most out of them. So I think it maybe hasn't been as overwhelmingly in terms of bringing in the amount of talent that you maybe would have expected upon hiring a 6-time Super Bowl winning head coach in Bill Belichick. I still think, all things considered, they've done an adequate job so far in the portal, getting this roster in a better position to compete next year in the ACC.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly it's in a better position. And the thing that people have to realize is that there are going to be guys that are added that simply, are just going to be bodies. I mean, when you have to replace as much as Carolina has to replace, there are going to be guys that are brought in here that they will just be depth pieces. Because look, the other thing that you have to remember is that while we feel pretty down on a lot of the guys on this roster, I mean, there are some young guys, particularly on the defensive side of the football, that haven't really gotten a look. And so maybe what they showed in the bowl practices, maybe what Belichick and his staff saw on film out of the high school ranks, they really like, and they think they can actually build with. So that's the other thing. When people are saying, oh, these certain positions, Carolina's just not landing guys, this is a really bad look. Well, it could also be that they really just like certain guys at these positions. And so, yeah, let's move into, that fraction of the fan base that is apparently concerned about Carolina not landing the big enough names. I mean, look, are there guys that you would have loved to have, guys that you think would have really fit for Carolina? Like the one for me that I would have really loved to have, and he never got here. And I got to be honest, I don't really understand the hype with this team and why they are landing so many guys. Squirrel White, I think, would have been tremendous here. And the fact that he went to Florida State, why are people going to Florida State, man? Mike Norvell's not going to be there much longer. That dude has proven what he showed us this past year is that he is that guy that you saw out there. He's the guy that's missed a bowl game. What is it, 3 of his first 5 years or something like that? He's not a great coach. And so I think that's one that you really wish that Carolina could have gotten. But I mean, yeah, I'm not panicked about the fact that they're missing on guys. I will say when they were missing on a lot of those guys and hadn't yet landed somebody like a Gavin Gibson, a Price Yates, a Peyton Waters, yeah, there was a little bit of concern because you saw a lot of these big targets that were going off the board, and you didn't even see visits that were scheduled for guys like Yates or Waters just yet. I think now you're probably in a more comfortable position, but I will say that I do think you probably want to get another starter quality type of player or two, particularly for me on the defensive line. I think you need guys down there because right now the only addition you've made there is CJ Mims, which means that's right, you're going to be playing a guy like Rodney Laura or Joel Starlings. One of those guys is probably going to end up being your starter unless Peter Pasansky ends up taking a huge jump as a true freshman. Same thing with Leroy Jackson. If that's a guy that makes a jump in his second year, although he suffered a season-ending injury towards the end of the year, so not sure how he's going to be affected going into next year. I do think there's still areas that you are a little concerned about there and running back in particular. But I think for the most part, this roster is in a pretty solid spot. And I don't think that people should be completely panicked about where exactly the roster is at and the guys that they're missing on.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I've just really, when it comes to the Belichick stuff, I've just tuned out all the negativity, just enjoyed what it's been like having this type of guy lead our football program. And I know that with that, there comes this heightened sense of expectation. And, I know I've kind of waxed poetically about how I think Carolina's going to win and win at a high level. And I do truly believe that. I don't expect that, though, in 2025. Like, 2025 for me is the foundation year. It's getting the program heading in the right direction on and off the field, and really figuring out how you're going to run a pro system at the college level with all of your personnel departments that you got to figure out, and just how is all going to come together. So that's where I am, because I don't think we're in a position to complain. I mean, I really don't. We went out and hired a 6-time Super Bowl winning head coach who's bringing a different approach, a different method to not just our program, but to the sport of college football. And if it works, this will be the model that a lot of schools will try to emulate moving forward. And it's still going to take time for it all to come together. The NFL regular season has just been over for a week. Mm-hmm. And I bet you there are still coaches he's wanting to hire and make those hires official, but is allowing those times to, those coaches to spend a little bit of time with their family before they uproot and move again and potentially start working, 24/7, 365 again. So, if we were a historic program that had been down for a few years and we were making this type of move, I could maybe understand it. That's not what North Carolina football is. We made an unorthodox hire. We thought outside the box, and we really went all in on a guy that, of course, has never coached at the college level. And with that, I think you need to just give it some time for it all to come together. And just remember, as much as we want to win in 2025, I think next year is all about setting the foundation for what this program is going to be moving forward, and the expectations about winning and the type of player he should recruit out of high school and how we should be in the transfer portal should really start next off season and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, yes. I do think that, we've seen that the portal is so important, and it can turn you into a contender quickly. I do think that it's okay for fans to have thought that with what was being brought to the table, with the promise from the athletic department of, we're going to have somewhere in the range of $20 million in NIL money this year, that you would be able to build a pretty significant roster up. I do think that one thing that people have to take into account here, and you could say that this is ridiculous, it's unacceptable, whatever. You were never going to have that money immediately. It's going to take time to build that money up. You would like to have that by next offseason to be able to compete right away, but it wasn't a snap of a finger. Unless you had a guy like Michael Jordan that stepped in and said, look, I'm giving you $15 million. Do what you have to do for football. I don't see that happening. And I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. MJ, I mean, look, he may donate some money to football. MJ is going to put his money towards Carolina basketball if he's going to put his money somewhere. So I think that until Carolina gets to that number, or gets even in the neighborhood of that number, which like I said, I think is going to take time, then you can't really panic just yet. I think the portal, if you're a little frustrated that they're missing on guys in the portal, whatever. That I think is, you can validate that. If you're one of the people that's concerned about the fact that they're missing on guys in the 2025 recruiting cycle, that I don't know what to tell you. That is ludicrous to me, because I mean, guys, you got to think he is just establishing relationships with some of these guys. Like, there are people that were getting frustrated, and this was one of the storylines that I had, but we can go ahead and just throw it out right here. Carolina misses on 2025 4-star interior offensive lineman Justin Hazenhudel out of Rabun Gap High School. A lot of people immediately frustrated. I had one guy that sent me a message and said, I don't understand how we're missing on guys like this. Belichick should be able to flex the muscle. This is a bad look for him, and this is a bad look for the university that we're missing on these types of guys to California. My counter to that is, yeah, you can say that. You could say that it's a bad look and he shouldn't be missing out on guys to Justin Wilcox. He's missing out to a staff that has been recruiting this dude for however many years. Now, they were a team that could have potentially jumped in late. I think they might have. But even still, you're talking about at least months, maybe even a year that they have been recruiting this kid. How long was Bill Belichick recruiting this kid? 3 weeks? Like, I don't understand. You thought he was going to work a miracle and just say, I'm Bill Belichick. You should be committed to me, not to the other school. That to me was always crazy. There was a reason why Hazenhudl, I forget exactly how you pronounce his name. There's a reason why he decommitted from Georgia Tech. It was because he took an official visit to California. Carolina jumped in there late. They were able to get an official visit and at least make it a competition. But I don't think you should be, fretting over the fact that Carolina missed on him. Now, I think 2026, that's when, especially if Belichick is still here and they're still not landing guys, then you can be concerned because you're already seeing just some of the guys that are talking in the state of North Carolina. He is having a massive impact on this state recruiting-wise so far. I mean, you had the Harris twins who are right down the road from us here where we're sitting at in our respective houses this evening. They go to Weddington High School. Guys that, look, Mac Brown offered them. Carolina may have been on their radar. And again, when I say may, it's a very strong may. They are firmly on the radar now. Guys that were blown away at the fact that they were talking with Bill Belichick. Felt like they were being prioritized. Same thing with Noah Clark, another big name in the state along the defensive line. Blown away talking to Bill Belichick. That's where you expect his influence to come in, is when they get to that 2026 class. And so I think you're right. I think that's when you can really start to look and see the results. I've told you guys all along, and I said this when, we started to see early in the portal that Carolina wasn't pulling in these massive names because that NIL money just wasn't there yet. This roster next year is not going to be good enough for this team to compete for an ACC title. It's not. This is going to be probably an 8-win football team. And I think you should be okay with that as a Tar Heel fan, that, okay, that is where we start, and then we potentially go up from here. I get it. It could be frustrating because that might be Belichick's only year here. But I think you have to just kind of take a risk and say, okay, maybe this year isn't going to be great, but if he does stick around for another year or two, that's when we could potentially be competing to make it to the college football playoff with the level of talent that he could bring in and the level of development that him and his staff could have on this roster.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's TBD on Carolina competing for a conference championship next year. Is it likely? Probably not. But we don't know what the league is going to look like, and we don't. I mean, if Bryce Baker turns out to be what he could be, that changes the outlook for this team in more ways than one, because that's going to be the biggest hindrance, I think, for expectation moving forward, is not knowing what you have at the quarterback position. If you got a guy, if you've got a difference maker, then it would not surprise me if when we get into November, Carolina is sitting there playing in meaningful games that could, with the pathway for them to get to Charlotte. But, it's as much as I talked about winning big and right away, it was always 26 and beyond is where I really looked at it and said, when he has a full year, when he has a full offseason, when he has all the different resources at his hands during the year, and he adapts to the college game and he gets all of his stuff in place, then I think that's when we'll kick up the expectation and say we should be going 10-2. We should be in Charlotte. We should be in the conversation to hear our names called on that selection Sunday. So, and I still think with what he's done so far, all of that is still very possible. And I think all of that is still very likely, because I think when this thing all comes together and he finalizes his staff, we'll be happy with it. And I think he's proven that he can go on the recruiting trail. And I think he's proven that He can relate to these 17, 18-year-old kids. And I think once they see the coaching job he's going to do this year, it'll make it easier for him to attract talent out of high school and out of the transfer portal.
All right, let's update really quickly for people before we get out of here where the staff currently stands right now. Now, again, there are only 2 guys that are officially hired to this staff. I want to stress that. The only guys that are official that have been announced by the university are Bill Belichick as the head coach and Michael Lombardi as the general manager. Everybody else are guys that inside Carolina, other sources have reported that they are expected to be a part of Carolina's coaching staff moving forward. So until these become official, anything can potentially change. Coaching-wise, you've got Stephen Belichick, defensive coordinator. Freddie Kitchens, offensive coordinator, although based off of what they apparently told another guy in the 2025 class that Carolina is now recruiting, that may not necessarily be the case. So that's something to put a pin in right there. Matt Lombardi, offensive assistant. Billy Miller, that's probably a new name since the last time that we've been on here. He was the head coach at IMG Academy. We know that, Belichick talked about that. I believe it was either during his intro presser or during one of his stops with Pat McAfee. That's a school that Belichick has strong connections to. Not shocking that they went down there and pull a guy like Billy Miller, who has a ton of experience coaching special teams between the high school, college, and NFL ranks. And then Chris Jones, defensive assistant, a guy that has spent a long, long time as a head coach, defensive coordinator, defensive assistant at the CFL level, also spent time in the NFL and some time in college. So another guy, versatile background, has been to a lot of different places. He is going to be a defensive assistant, according to reports. The training staff, Moses Cabrera, the head of strength and conditioning. And there is a rumor that they are keeping Amber Reinstein-Ressa, who is the director of nutrition. Now, that one is not 100% confirmed just yet, but hopefully that is something that Carolina ends up confirming here sooner rather than later. Front office staff, you have Andrew Blaylock, player personnel, Joe Anil, player personnel, Corey Giddings, player personnel, and then their most recent hire, Chris Mattis. This is a guy that comes to Carolina. He will be a part of the player personnel department. Mike Kadlick, the Patriots beat reporter for CLNS Media, had this the other day. This is a guy that leaves the Patriots director of football development role that he held for a little less than a year to take this job. Now, you may say, well, they fired Gerard Mayo, so that might have been part of the reason why he ends up taking this job, because maybe he was going to head out too. Maybe, but I highly doubt it, especially with the fact that they were basically sticking with a Belichick disciple. The thing with Mike Vrabel is he never officially coached under Bill Belichick, but it's a very similar style that he has as a coach. So you would imagine that a guy like Mattis would fit exactly what they are still wanting there in New England. He ends up leaving and will now become a part of the player personnel grouping here. So when you look at this staff, you've wrote about a few of these guys because of the timing of some of the news breaking and everything like that. How do you feel about where the staff is at? And or is there a little frustration? I know you said earlier that maybe they're waiting on some of these guys that are currently with NFL teams and everything like that. But is there a little frustration with the fact that they don't have more guys officially in place, which could potentially help them when it comes to things like the transfer portal?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to maybe say that maybe that's why they haven't had the success that what you wanted or expected them to have in the portal, because he's finalizing his staff. With that all being said, the portal it opens again in the spring, right? So Carolina will have another chance once they have their staff in place. And let's be mindful here. There will be a handful of significant players that will transfer again. That maybe Carolina's in a better position if they want to add to the roster to do such a thing. But when you look at what he's expected to do, I think we all knew he was going to bring his son on board. So no surprise there. Did a solid job in his lone year at Washington. Remember, we both stressed we'd prefer the coordinators to have college experience because it is a different game. And his son, it's not a lot of experience, but he fits the mold. The biggest issue I had, and you're saying this might not be the case, was the idea that Freddie Kitchens was going to be the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
That was the one where I could legitimately gripe and complain about that, because you're talking about a guy that mind you, who has spent a lot of time in the NFL, called plays for 18 games at the NFL level, or it was like 2022 is a year and a half is what it really equated to. Not a lot of play calling experience, even at the NFL level. And as much as I make fun of these bowl games not mattering, you could tell he did not have that team ready to play. For whatever reason, whether it was because it was cold, whether they were just distracted by Belichick, no matter what it was, he had 3 weeks to get that group ready to play, and he did not. And his in-game adjustments when he lost his quarterback were very concerning as well, if that guy were to become your full-time offensive play caller. So, but I think all in all, man, I think you got to like what he's doing. And he's bringing the former NFL people to the college ranks like he promised he was going to do. And I think when it's all said and done, he'll get the bang for his buck, and he'll put together a staff that'll help this team be able to win more often than not on Saturdays.
Yeah, so with Kitchens, it's confusing. I would guess he called plays when he was the head coach of the Browns in 2019. So if that's the case, then it's 2.5 years roughly of play calling, because he was their offensive coordinator in 2018.
But was not their play caller.
But he was the offensive coordinator. So was he not?
He did not become the play call until he became their interim head coach.
Okay, so well, he didn't even become their interim head coach. Remember, they just hired him after the season because they really liked him. They liked what he had done with Baker. And then, he eventually ends up becoming the interim offensive coordinator for the Giants. I'm going to tell you guys right out, pathetic. I mean, now it really, you couldn't put a ton on him because Pat Shurmur was just complete garbage. And they ended up firing him midseason. That offense was terrible. There was absolutely no hope for that group from the word go. Daniel Jones was your quarterback. They had no wide receivers. The offensive line was terrible. So maybe you don't put that on him, but you didn't really learn much about him as a play caller there. And again, I don't know what that means. He just apparently said to, and this is the other guy that Carolina's in on now, Madrid Tucker, the 2025 athlete. I believe that they're going to play him at wide receiver, though, based off of the conversations and some of the stuff that has been, sent to me that he has been having with certain outlets and stuff like that. He's a guy that I think Carolina looks at him 5'9.5", $155. He fits exactly what Belichick is looking for. Small slot receivers that are fast, shifty, can get open. One of the scouting reports on him is that he is one of the better separators, in terms of route running of any of the guys that they've seen in the state of Florida in this recruiting cycle. That is certainly noteworthy. But when he spoke with, I believe it was Inside Carolina was the one that was sent to me. It was either that or On 3 Sports. Someone sent me a piece of it where it said that Freddie Kitchens told him, was speaking with him and would not divulge who the OC is going to be or who the wide receivers coach is going to be. So who knows? That could still mean he ends up being the offensive coordinator, but there's nothing 100% concrete at this point. I think, yeah, you're right. If they end up going with another offensive coordinator, whoever it is, I mean, I don't know. If it was Josh McDaniels, I probably wouldn't love it because Josh McDaniels is just a complete douche. Like We've heard that from a lot of different people that have been under him as, players, coaches. Everybody pretty much everywhere he goes absolutely hates his guts, but he can coach. So that's the reason he keeps getting jobs. Hopefully that is the guy that Mike Vrabel is going to bring with him to New England, and we won't have to worry about that. But I think outside of that, some of the other names, Tommy Rees, would love that as the offensive coordinator hire. Charlie Weiss Jr., that was a name that was rumored at the very start. Would not mind that one at all. Hell, I'd even take Scott Turner. I think there's upside, at least with Scott Turner. I don't think there's really any upside with Freddie Kitchens. So we'll have to see how the staff ends up panning out. Hopefully some of those things are getting ironed out as we speak, and eventually those will become official sooner rather than later to help Carolina potentially land some of the bigger names in the portal here at the end. Remember, people are asking, well, how are there still guys entering the transfer portal? There's a 5-day window after each bowl game. That was something that was not clarified. The article that I read said it was just playoff game, but it was every bowl game. I think most of the other windows, if not all of them, now are officially closed. The only ones that still remain open are the college football playoff ones. So right now you've got Penn State players that are entering the portal and Texas players that will enter the portal as well. And then after the national title game, you'll see the guys from Ohio State and from Notre Dame that will potentially enter the portal. Maybe there's a couple of names that Carolina can grab there to potentially add to their roster that could be big names. So we'll just have to wait and see. But any of that, as well as any of the other news that we talked about here tonight, you can find it on the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Make sure you go there and check out all of the latest, including an article breaking down Peyton Waters, the safety transfer from Washington that Carolina landed earlier today. I tell you why I'm pretty excited about that one. I think there is a lot of potential for that to be a solution for Carolina at a safety spot that has just been a disaster since Mac Brown returned to Chapel Hill. So hopefully that's something that Bill Belichick and his staff can get ironed out with the help of some of these new transfers. Also, the articles up there that you guys can check out about Carolina missing on Justin Hasenhüttl and now turning their attention to Madrid Tucker, and plenty of other stuff on the website as well, recruiting-wise, transfer portal-wise, staff-wise. All on the website. Check it out, HeelToughBlog.com. You can check out all of the basketball coverage as well. Carolina with a massive win over NC State over the weekend. And I know people will say massive win. That's a team that has struggled for most of the year. We know what that rivalry is. Go on the road, find a way to win, do it in dramatic fashion, which, certainly was something that you don't love to see when you have a 9-point lead at one point in the second half. But still, a win that hopefully will help propel Carolina forward through the rest of their schedule. Make sure you go back, read that recap on the website at HeelToughBlog.com. Meanwhile, the podcast, you can check out both podcasts wherever you listen to your podcast. You can either subscribe or follow. There are different ways to do it depending on which app you are listening on, but we would greatly appreciate if you could go there and do that for us. It would help us out so much. And if you're watching on the Facebook page or the YouTube page, make sure you like the Facebook page or subscribe to the YouTube page. That would help us as well. If you like the Facebook page, also will allow those articles that we post to appear right on your timeline. The best thing to do, though, is to go over to Twitter, go to Heel Tough Blog on Twitter, follow that account and turn on the notifications, because when you do that, you will get every article right to your phone the minute that we post it to keep up with all of the latest news. If you don't want to do that, we just encourage you, go to the website, HeelToughBlog.com, morning, afternoon, and evening, because that's how much news we have been having over this stretch. So keep yourself up to date so that you don't miss anything. So that wraps it up once again for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.